Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. Welcome to This Week in FCPA, episode 250 for the week ending April 30, 2021, the O is Out edition. If you are watching this live, you will no doubt see the smiling face of the coolest guy in compliance, Matt Kelly, not the sour, dour face of Mr. Monitors himself, Jay Rosen, who is OOO today due to a move. So Matt has agreed to join me to talk about one of the most delicious stories to come out in the last couple of days, and that is that Alex O has resigned from her position as Director of Enforcement at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Matt, you didn't break the story, but you did write about it and blog about it, and you were able to put together a couple of disparate pieces. So perhaps you could set the stage on what happened here.
Yeah, so this is nuts. What happened is that Alex O, who was named as the new director of the Division of Division of Enforcement for the SEC last week on April 22nd, she was announced as the new director. And yesterday, April 28th, 6 days later, she resigned. So I'm not even entirely clear if Miss O was even on the job at all, or like, did she get her office email set up in that time and now it's deactivated? But whatever had happened, it seems to be, there are a couple of different threads of what went on here. Is that there are definitely liberal voices within the Democratic Party that were not thrilled with Alex O as the enforcement director, because she had a long career as a corporate defense attorney, including with Exxon. And then there seems to be this precipient event specifically that just a few days ago, a judge found that she might have some conduct concerns, that it seems like she said something untoward about opposing counsel in a deposition, and the judge was talking about why shouldn't he sanction her, and we can get into that, but there was that. There was the fact that she had little political enthusiasm among Chairman Gary Gensler's political supporters and constituencies. And so here we are. She resigned 6 days after she started.
So I find this delicious as a lawyer, as an absolute political junkie, as a fan of the Biden administration, as a watcher of the nutbag left-wing part of the Democratic Party. We've got a lot going on here to unpack, but I have to start, Matt, with Alex O, partner Paul Weiss, a defender of corporate America, and in my mind, all things just and right, moving over to become a regulator. And I was actually, if not thrilled, intrigued, because I felt like when you have someone, and speaking as a former defense lawyer, when you have someone who's defended corporations for a long period of time, they know where all the bodies are buried, and they know the regulatory, what's the right word? Shortcuts, let me say that sometimes companies use. And so I thought it would be just an excellent resource at the SEC that, and my experience is much like converted Catholics, there's hell hath no fury like a converted Catholic, and hell hath no fury like a converted regulator. And we've seen many instances of that over the years, I think. But that's the nature of being a lawyer. You rigorously and zealously represent your client, whoever that client is at that moment. It might be Exxon today, and tomorrow it might be the Securities and Exchange Commission. So I wasn't really offended by her prior work. I thought it would actually bring a different new level to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Any kind of thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I agree with you, frankly. So the political discontent around Alex O came from several different liberal advocacy groups, and they had even sent Gary Gensler a letter earlier this week expressing their dismay that Alex O, having so many years, she worked 17 years at Paul Weiss. She was co-chair of their FCPA defense practice, and now here she is enforcing the FCPA. To your point, Tom, I actually think she probably would have been very skillful at that if her heart was in it. And I think lawyers, they're paid to put their hearts into their client's defense or client's prosecution, as the case may be. And I think she probably would have been very good at it. I'm actually reminded of Andrew Weissman, who in the Obama administration was head of the fraud section at the Justice Department, went on to work with Bob Mueller investigating Donald Trump in the first impeachment scandal. We should remember that before all of that, Andrew Weissman represented the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, published a paper probably about 10 years ago talking about FCPA reform. And then shortly thereafter, he got hired by the Justice Department to run FCPA enforcement. He did a really good job of it. So I kind of sort of see for policy moves, maybe you wouldn't want somebody to make such a drastic switch, but Alex O wasn't going to be in a policy position. She was in an enforcement position. She probably could have done a good job. We'll never know. But all of that also is aside from or parallel to whatever might have happened with this deposition where she ran afoul of the judge overseeing the case. And if we want to get into that, that seems like it might be I think the true story is probably a confluence of whatever happened with this deposition and the political disenchantment with O being appointed to the SEC. I think somewhere in all of that is actually why her position just became untenable and she had to bail.
So I want to get into that because that to me is part of the deliciousness of this. And I'm going to quote from your blog, Matt, where O apparently called her opposing counsel agitated, disrespectful, and unhinged. And then your addition without apparently offering any evidence. Well, I cannot tell you the number of depositions I have sat in, taken, defended. And if that's actionable and if that's sanctionable, there are a whole lot of lawyers in this country that are in a world of hurt.
That's what I don't get. Like, I thought that's what a lawyer did in a deposition was you called opposing counsel's names. And so I am unclear under what circumstance would an outburst like that lead to a judge saying, please explain to me why I shouldn't sanction you because what you said wasn't true. It seems like a very subjective sort of a thing. But I don't know if she just said during a deposition, you're being a jerk, or if she put in an actual court filing and lied to the judge, we were derailed in this deposition because opposing counsel was a jerk. All right, man, I could see that. Tom, you're a practicing lawyer, or you were a practicing lawyer. I never have been. So I'm not sure I get the nuance of what happened here and what went off the rails.
Generally speaking, there's one word, and I think everyone would know what that one word is that you cannot say on the record in a deposition because then it's on the record. If you're off the record, you can say whatever you want. And that word was not part of the three that you quoted. The other part, though, Matt, also that you noted was just actually in a deposition defending ExxonMobil. And so I began to wonder, it's been noted in the public reporting about her nomination and acceptance, or rather accepting the position, and of course her resignation, that she not only did the firm represent ExxonMobil, but she did. So I'm wondering if there was something in that representation or even that case that we haven't heard about yet, simply beyond calling a opposing counsel unhinged. Well, in my opinion, all opposing counsel were unhinged because they were opposing me. I just don't get that. But, maybe there was something in there that hasn't come out yet. But could we maybe now flip it over to what's always referred to as the Elizabeth Warren equation? Yeah. I would have thought that her selection would have at least been run by Senator Warren, if not approved by Senator Warren. And so that part of the Democratic Party that objected to it, I mean, I felt like that had been handled. Do you have a different take?
I do wonder, like, if we want to talk about what does this mean for Gary Gensler as SEC chairman. Clearly, this is not a headache he wanted to have. This is an embarrassment for him right out of the gate. But I'm sort of wondering, how did this happen? The deposition in question took place, I believe, in February. Gensler himself was not confirmed until, I think, the beginning of March, and he had a confirmation hearing in the Senate sometime in mid-March. Then he was confirmed earlier in April this month. I'm sorry. So whatever happened with this deposition in February was old news and should have come up in the vetting that Gensler and his team would have done on Alex O probably earlier this month. And so did they miss this? Did Alex O not disclose it? Was the judge's decision just so unexpected that nobody thought this would become a thing, and it was a thing? Or did they all know about it and figured we shouldn't brief the Elizabeth Warren wing of the party, which is an important wing of the Democratic Party, and she does sit on the Senate Banking Committee, which oversees Gary Gensler. So like, there's a whole lot that I'm just wondering, how did you miss this? This was an important appointment for Gary Gensler. It's the biggest division within the SEC. I'm sure he is not an enforcement chairman per se. I would say more he's like a policy maven, and he's got some big policy things he needs to figure out while he's in charge. So Alex O was going to be one of his big lieutenants, and now this blows up. And the very fact that it did, I just like, there's supposed to be somebody who prevents these explosions, and that didn't happen.
There's one other point you raised in your blog that really I don't think has been explored, and it may be because of it's not timely or ripe yet, but I think you reported that Paul Weiss had been contacted for comment about her coming back to the firm, and there was no instant arms open, come on back. So maybe something else is at play here because of that.
I could only speculate, so I won't. My understanding is they got a comment from Paul Weiss. I think it was law.com that tracked them down almost immediately after Alex O had resigned. So it could just be a case of nobody knew what was going on. The ExxonMobil case itself, we might as well mention that lawsuit is a long-running thing. I think it was originally filed nearly 20 years ago about human rights abuses that allegedly Exxon is responsible for in Indonesia against some indigenous peoples there who had filed a lawsuit against Exxon, I want to say in 2001 or sometime in the early 2000s. It's been dragging on forever and a day. What all the details are, honestly, I don't know. And here we are.
I guess I'm perhaps less concerned about the new SEC chair, that perhaps this might be an embarrassment, but it happened early enough on his watch that he could make a comeback. Would you think this is the type of problem that Jay Clayton faced in terms of the KPMG imbroglio and the PCAOB, that it kind of imploded or exploded on the scene a few months after he came on board as the SEC?
No, those changes, that's an interesting question. The problems that beset Jay Clayton when he first arrived and during the Trump administration were much deeper and more systemic, that the commission itself needed to change some of the ways that it oversaw the PCAOB. They had a big cybersecurity breach at the same time. Clayton had a lot of operational things blow up right away. This is more of a personnel thing. It is worth wondering, okay, if the Elizabeth Warren wing of the Democratic Party is now going to exercise some sort of veto power over who's the head of enforcement, well, then who is going to be the head of enforcement? Because somebody who I think Elizabeth Warren would say, yeah, this is great, that person's probably going to have corporate defense lawyers breathing on a paper bag. We don't know who this new successor might be, but it's clearly not going to be somebody who is a vigorous corporate defense lawyer for many years, because that ain't going to fly. And Gensler, I don't think, needs that headache. He's got enough challenges in his job.
Okay. Well, this has been a delivery. I'm sure you will follow it, and I'll follow it as well. I don't know if we'll get a weeds list, but thanks for coming on a special cameo.
All right. Well, take care. Bye.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a special cameo appearance from Matt Kelly, and we'll head on to some of the other stories which caught my eye this week. First up, we have a story about 3 priorities for forward-thinking boards from Maria Moats posted on Corporate Compliance Insights, and she says that there are a couple of boards should get ahead of now. Number 1, challenge management on climate issues. The Biden administration has obviously made combating climate change a top priority, and companies think about this in the context of their ESG disclosures. Number 2, commit to making real diversity and inclusion changes. Yes, more needs to be done done when it comes to D&I, but that's just the start. You have to change incentives, you have to change quantifiable goals, and you have to make progress. And finally, and this is perhaps the most prescient, double down on crisis planning. We've moved from disaster recovery to business continuity to business as usual. So crisis planning is going to be absolutely critical. Now we are going to bring on Dave Leaford. Dave is the editor-in-chief at Compliance Week, and Dave is here to share some really exciting news, I think, with us about the upcoming Compliance Week 2021 conference. So Dave, first of all, welcome and to the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's the first time I've been on since the video's been on. This is great.
Yep. So we do a live stream of 3 podcasts a week, and then we also make it a regular audio podcast. So what I'm going to do, in addition to posting this, is I'm going to take your, cut out your part and post it as a separate post on LinkedIn. So we'll get Dave Leaford on Compliance Week 2021.
Very good.
So with that, Dave, could you tell us a little bit about a general overview of this year's conference?
So yeah, first off, I just want to say that we're all really bummed that COVID is still hanging around. We would have loved to have gone live this year. We haven't been live since our May 2019 national conference. So again, we're going virtual for a second straight year, but it's all right. It means you don't have to travel. It means it's a lot cheaper to attend. I mean, you still get all of the great insight, but you don't get that that in-person feel of our live event. So I'm really looking forward to next year. We'll be back in DC again, as we usually are, for our 17th annual at the JW Marriott there. So we're looking forward to that. But this year's, we're going May 11th through 13. It's going to be 3 days. I think we got 20-something sessions, more than 60 speakers. Our headliner on day one is going to be James Comey, former FBI director. He was supposed to keynote our live 2020 event, but obviously we got pushed back because of COVID. We just talked to him today. We did our prep call with him, and he's sort of going to give a compliance pep talk of sorts. I mean, it's going to stress the importance of ethics and compliance and really sustaining an ethical culture during what he'll call boom times, sort of in anticipation of a post-COVID economic recovery, an economic boom. And as we've learned from past experiences and past periods of economic growth, that these boom times that come after prolonged struggle often see a lot of corners cut, a lot of fraud, and so he's sort of going to give the practitioners in the audience a little bit of a pep talk, a little bit of a, your jobs are more important than ever kind of a message. He'll also be reading the tea leaves on the Biden regulatory agenda, in particular, what's happening with the SEC, what might be on Gensler's mind, the new focus on ESG. So we'll have a little bit of a focus on that. He'll also talk about the importance of the Justice Department, reinforcing its political independence. So and the other thing I'll say about Comey is that we know he's a controversial figure, and there are people on both sides of the aisle that probably don't like him and don't agree with a lot of what he's done over the years. But I'll say this, after speaking with him and after reading his book, A Higher Loyalty, it's clear, at least to me, that he really agonized over his decision to reopen the Hillary Clinton email investigation just before the 2016 election. So to me anyway, he is a leader who consistently tries to do the right thing do the right thing for the right reasons. And that's really what compliance in ethics is all about. And so I'd want to hear from a person who is in such a high profile place and has to make these important decisions, even if I didn't necessarily agree with his decision. So we're really looking forward to him kicking things off on Monday, the 11th. The second day will be highlighted by CCO from Citi, Mary McNiff. She'll have a fireside chat with our events director, Julie DeMauro. She started at Citi last June as CCO, so just a few months after COVID hit. So she'll sort of be talking about her responsibilities as, being responsible for risk management for essentially the world's most global bank. They have operations in nearly 100 countries. So she'll be discussing Citi's efforts to modernize infrastructure and sort of dealing with the after effects of COVID, and sort of how Citi got through COVID period. Another highlight on the agenda that I'll want to point out is we have our second annual Excellence in Compliance Awards that'll be awarded this year. We have 7 awards, including CCO of the Year, including Lifetime Award, and for the first time we have a Compliance Program of the Year too. We got a lot of great nominations. The winners have been selected. They've been interviewed. Really insightful stuff from all of them. So we'll be revealing the winners and interviews with each winners on day 1 of our conference, May 11th, I think at around noon time. Some of the other elements of the event are we're doing something new on the 3rd day of the event. So day 3, Wednesday, May 13th. We're calling it Career Day. So it's what it really is. It's a half day focused on advancing in your compliance career. We'll cover how to have conversations about compensation, how to best promote yourself to your boss or your executive team. Career coach Amy Barnard-Bond is going to kick things off that day with a sort of a keynote speech about how to do those things. That day also features special women's virtual luncheon, and Christy Grant Hart will be speaking then, discussing topics that are specific to the challenges that women face in the workplace. Then throughout, I should note that we're still trying to land. We have a representative from the SEC speaking. We're still trying to try to reel in Gary Gensler, the newly named chair, to speak at the conference. But since he is so new, we haven't got a confirmation from him yet, and at this point, this late in the game, we probably shouldn't expect to, unfortunately. But our agenda also features, we'll have Wei Chen, a compliance pioneer, talking about training and analytics. We'll have a lot of talk about compliance and technology, AI, machine learning. Also, we'll have a session on where compliance will be in 2030, which honestly sounds like it's really far away, but it's less than a decade away. We'll still have a lot of the usual things you would expect. Latest best practices on third-party risk management. Cybersecurity is an important topic this year. Reporting, how to report on diversity and inclusion efforts to the board, and how to quantify those efforts, because obviously that's been a big initiative for a lot of organizations this past year, and so that conversation will center around sort of how to quantify that, how to talk about it to the board in ways where you can show real progress. We're talking about regulatory change management, what the sort of reading the tea leaves on the Biden administration. So we've really got all of the usual topics that you would expect at the Compliance Week live conference. We've got it packed into that same 3 days that we usually have. It's a little bit more spread out. We'd expect, it'll be available on demand as well. So it's not like you'll have to spend 3 days in front of your computer screen. Just jumping from session to session. They'll all be archived and available to consume whenever you want. Obviously, each session will have its own continuing learning credits. I know those are incredibly important for all attendees. It'll be very easy to download your certificates. We've got a very intuitive digital platform that we use for that. So we're really looking forward to it. It's coming together very nicely. We're into the final stretch now. We're about a week and a half away, maybe 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks away. So the planning is full bore. We think it's going to be great.
So Dave, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for your segment, but I was wondering if any of the listeners to this podcast wanted to attend, would there be a special code they could use that we'll put in to the show notes?
Yeah, so yes, we created a code called Podcast 599. So if you enter that code, Podcast 599, during the checkout process, go to Compliance Week website, complianceweek.com, If you click on events, you'll be able to register for the national conference right there. And during the checkout process, if you enter podcast 599, you'll get, I think it's a $300 discount to pay $599 for all 3 days. But again, you get the CPE credits, you get the archive. It'll be a great experience.
Well, Dave, on behalf of the listeners to This Week in FCPA, I wanted to thank you for that kind offer. And I wanted to thank you for coming on in this special cameo appearance to tell us about Compliance Week 2021, one of the annual top conferences in the compliance space. And I look forward to when we can get together on the live conference as well.
Same here, Tom. I can't wait to get back in person. I'm chomping at the bit. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, so we are back to our stories, and the next story comes to us from Mike Volkov, in his always great corruption, crime, and compliance blog, and he talks about why compliance must understand business process. This is a critical area for every compliance officer. If you don't understand the business processes of your company, you're going to be not only in a world of hurt and not be able to deliver an appropriate, but more importantly, you'll not garner the trust of the business folks. If you can't speak business talk, if you can't read a spreadsheet, if you can't understand how your own company's business processes work, then you're not going to be able to do compliance because you will overlay a system which really does not apply to the business processes. So how do you learn about business processes? Well, go down the hall and have a cup of coffee with the head of internal audit. Go down the hall and have a cup of coffee with the head of sales. Go down the hall and have a cup of coffee with the ISO. There are internal resources in every company that can educate you on your own business processes. And more importantly, those people want to talk to you. They want to know who's compliance. They don't want compliance to be Dr. No at the land of no more than you want it to be. So understand your business processes. It's a key component of being a compliance officer. Next up, we have a story about location risk. And this comes to us in an article from CCI entitled, "And the award for the most disastrous third-party risk goes to," by Atul Vashistha. I'm sorry, I'm sure I butchered your name. But she talked about location risk as a risk that is not really thought about enough. But her article is much broader than that. She takes a look at financial and cyber risks, and here she sees companies not utilizing data enough. She focuses on resiliency risks and really emphasizing that resiliency requires monitoring continuously. It requires monitoring on locations, and it requires monitoring on a broad variety of risks. Some of the risks on the horizon for the rest of 2021 and perhaps further include your own employees or hidden risks in your organization. We mentioned cyber and financial risk, regulatory and compliance risks. Obviously, after ever again shipping in the Suez Canal, supply chain disruption risks. Now, of course, we have ESG risks. So it's a great article. And if you don't focus on location risks, I think it's something that you might want to think about going forward. Next up, from the Harvard Law School Forum on Corporate Governance, an article on investor due diligence on modern slavery for companies. This comes to us from someone whose name I'm going to completely butcher, Subdoha Mishra. Sorry again. But he takes a look at how investors should consider due diligence on modern slavery issues for corporations they're thinking about investing in. And he works with Institutional Shareholder Services, a well-known corporate rating agency. And so he says you should focus on forced labor. And are there information, or is there information that you can access which would help you around this? He points you to the International Labor Organization, their work around forced labor that you can take a look at. You should measure and ensure adherence to labor standards in your supply chain. Think about improvements, potential improvements in high-risk industry. And when you think about this from the investor perspective, I think it really puts a cap on why it's so critical. Yes, we have regulatory. Yes, it's a moral issue, but know what? It's a business issue. So think about performing due diligence. And for the compliance officer, this may mean you have to perform due diligence on companies you do business with, both in the supply chain and on the investor side. Next up, May is Internal Auditors Month. And this will no doubt warm the heart of Jonathan Marks and his internal auditor colleagues. It comes to us in an article from Navex Global's Risk and Compliance Matters blog. And it starts off by telling us, once again, that internal audit serves as organization's third line of defense. The first line of defense is business units that own risk. Second is risk and control specialists who support the first line. And then third line is auditors who validate and verify these. So I'm not sure you would want to go so far as to say it's Hug Your Internal Auditors Month, but it may give you pause as a compliance practitioner to think about what's the role of internal audit in my compliance program? When was the last time you went down and had a virtual cup of coffee with your head of internal audit? And you should use internal audit in a way that will help move the ball forward. Next up, Dick Casson has a just fascinating article on working from home procrastination. And he starts off by saying, it occurred to me that work from home has always been the norm for professional writers. So he took a look at how some seasoned writers handle their procrastination, and then other procrastinations that worse are for all of us. He discovered right off the bat that most writers are huge procrastinators. And I would have to say, when I have my writing hat on, I'm one of those. But many tech workers who've been in the work from home environment really have said that the normal attention span is down to just a few hours a day. And what really Dick took from this is the procrastination may not be such a negative thing at times. And it's a really cute and funny article, and I would urge you to take a look at it. So kudos to Dick Casson. Next up, in another article from the FCPA blog, we take a look at risk-based training. And this comes to us from Peter Vickness. I think he's a first-time contributor to the This Week in FCPA. He may have previously written for the FCPA blog. But he really talks about risk-based training. And this is a concept that's been floating around for some time and is not really new. But he says having a risk-based approach to train employees is really a way to demonstrate to regulators the robustness of your system. Obviously, this is something that people like Ricardo Peloton and Ronnie Feldman have been talking about for quite a while in the training space. But you don't need to deliver your standard FCPA training annually to everybody. You need to deliver gatekeeper training to gatekeepers, board of directors training to boards of directors, senior management training, and most importantly, those business BD folks out on the front line. So if you can risk rank your employees and deliver both training and communications in such a manner, I think that will be something that will be looked very favorably upon by the Department of Justice. So we are to the section on podcasts and events. A few podcast notes this week on the Compliance Life. I had my fourth and final episode with Jonathan Kellerman, partner at Stone Turn, and he took a look down the road for what's next in compliance. In events, we have K2 Integrity on May 6th as a webinar in Spanish, reputational due diligence for companies and investment firms. We've linked to registration. As Dave Leafort mentioned, you can have a discount to Compliance Week 2021. Use the code podcast 599 at checkout. I've also linked to the registration and information. Once again, CCI has released a new ebook, the FCPA Year in Review by yours truly. the compliance evangelist, Tom Fox. You can obtain a copy by going to the CCI website or through the show notes in this episode. And best of all, it's free. It's a great resource, if I say so myself. But the next best resource that you might want to pay for is the Compliance Handbook 2nd edition, which I humbly submit to you is the best single author volume on how to design, create, and implement a best practices compliance program. I'm extraordinarily pleased to have LexisNexis as the publisher for this update, and it's in production. It should be available within the next couple of months, but you can get a discount to it by using the code FOX25. So I know we had a little bit shorter show this week, but hopefully Jay and his family's move went smoothly. I hope you enjoyed Matt Kelly with his cameo appearance to talk about Alex O and leaving the SEC, and Dave Leafort, who talked about Compliance 2021. So this is Tom Fox. This is the end of This Week in FCPA for the week ending April 30, 2021. Thanks so much for listening.